So this is a video that I took recently when I was visiting a property that I used to work on for about 3 years during the pandemic and everything. And this is in Waimea on the Big Island of Hawaii. It's at about 2,500 feet elevation, right in the optimal growing zone for a lot of plants. And this area receives a lot of rainfall, has a lot of good soil, and gets a lot of sunshine. So things grow really quickly here, and it's a really good opportunity to try out these sort of food forest systems, and build these things from the ground up. Like, this was all lawn before. There were a few small native trees planted just in the middle of lawn, and what we did is sort of start to fill the gaps, build these like rock walls and these sort of meandering path systems, and really just cram in as much diversity as possible. So what you're looking at is a mix of probably about 50-50 native plants to canoe crops, which are Polynesian introduced food crops, things like bananas, papayas, sweet potato. But it's sort of this half-half system of like really cool, rare, native, endemic plants, and then all kinds of other stuff that has been introduced. And it's just endlessly fascinating to like walk through. It's such a small little area, but there's so much to look at. And what we did is we sort of used this black plastic edging material to really define the edges, which sort of make it easy to understand where the line between like lawn and everything else is. So the homeowners can come through on their riding mower and with the weed whackers and easily clean up the edges and kind of give it that sort of aesthetic, which some people might not like, but I think it actually works really well in this type of situation. The homeowners, they have a kid, they have a whole, they have lives to live, so they can't spend a lot of time on this. And it's really interesting to me, like, since stopping, I basically moved away and haven't been working on this system for about a year and a half, to see sort of what has happened without my influence. And the owners basically were saying that they pretty much do nothing in here except for mow around the edges, and the system has just sort of continued on and really filled in, and there's a lot of food being produced, and a lot of habitat. So that section is really interesting. And then this is a different section. This is a fenced in area. We installed this fence to sort of start keeping livestock of different kinds. We have pigs, ducks, and chickens at this site. And the pigs aren't really supposed to come into this section. They have their own pen, which you'll see in a moment. But one of the owners accidentally leaves the gate open all the time, so the pigs actually come in here and kind of root around, and they're a little bit destructive. But then also they poop and they provide fertilizer, and in some ways they're kind of maintaining this system. It's a little bit interesting to think about. But originally, like, if this was my property, I wouldn't want the pigs coming into this section, and it would probably look a little different. Right now it's looking a little rough, but I built that little chicken coop, and so the chickens and ducks, they can come through the fence, and ideally the pigs would stay on that side. And I put little fences around everything so that they don't damage those trees. But if you have a keen eye, you might notice there is some damage from pigs rooting around the bases of some of the trees, and it's a little bit concerning. But so I built this pond, and the ducks absolutely love it. Wildlife, a lot of dragonflies. And I've even seen some really cool native birds come by. There's a native hawk called an eo, which I got to see. I actually thought it was going to eat our chickens, but it didn't. So anyway, this section is kind of fun. It And the owner was saying like that, it's pretty interesting, just kind of this like wild sections, fun to go roam around in. It's ice cream bean, there's aveo, there's peppers, bananas. And I sort of contoured this whole area into sort of like a system of swales and little basins. So hopefully that's sort of working to like capture extra rain. But the ground here is really porous. The soil is, well drained. So really what it's doing is collecting these pockets of deep, organic rich mulch and soils. So, but then you can also see that there's some areas of like barren soil, which is not great. And I think that's probably from the pigs, maybe the chickens. But and then here's sort of an edge system along the edge of the property that I built. Really filled in, provide a little bit of a privacy screen, but also just providing food and habitat. Built that little bench, but really, this system is what I was most enthralled by, and this sort of aesthetic of, these clean edges, and on the one hand you have lawn and these clean edges, but then within these systems, within the little sections there, you have just wild, semi-domesticated, semi-wild systems, so things can kind of do their own thing in there, and it can get a little weedy, and it's okay. But these are all like rare native plants. That's a kului and a nilima, and some ferns, a lot of different fern diversity. And then here's some, a mix of different things. And this section is really interesting to me, and I'd really love to see this in the future and kind of see how this progresses, with minimal maintenance. But here's this arch that we made with lilikoi, or passion fruit, growing on it. There's a Jackson chameleon in there. And then underneath this ohia tree, I planted tons of these little different species of peperomias, known as alawainui, and some other kind of ornamental things, non-natives, and some ferns. So just to try to really increase the diversity and the complexity of the habitat, the structure. And then there's just sort of these like rock walls that are mainly like, as a aesthetic element, but also a little bit of a functional, provide a little bit more habitat for lizards and everything. So, and then over here on the opposite end of the property is another edge system that's filling in right along the edge. We've got these interesting, this is like mostly native stuff. And actually a lot of this was planted by the previous owner of the property. And I kind of credit that to sort of helping me, start to become obsessed with native plants in Hawaii and elsewhere, because, I got to see them on this property. They're there, and I got to wonder what they were and identify them. This is a ho'ava, and, that's a really interesting edge system. And then, they have a lot of lawn space, so they can play soccer and stuff. And at this point, it's unrealistic to try to fill in all of that. So, and then here are some little peperomias and other epiphytes that I planted in the trees along the edge to, again, try to increase the diversity of native plants and everything. So it's cool to see that those are thriving, little epiphytes. And then here's a section in one of the corners. This is basically another food forest with avocados, citrus, a couple native plants as the canopy. There's a pear and plum, and then this sort of understory, this diverse understory of like sweet potatoes, taro, comfrey, basil, there's a yuzu lemon, and then like tea, I don't know, a bunch of different stuff. And there was a recent windstorm in here in this area, and a couple trees came down, so it's looking a little rough, but it's good to see that there's diversity, and this like sort of diverse network of plants that are going to fill the gaps. But yeah, it's a little rough over here. Needs some work. But anyway, this is just a quick tour, quick little update on this site. It's good to get some documentation because, it's still kind of it's still maturing. Even though things grow quickly here, a lot of these trees can get much bigger. The canopies will develop, and so I think it's good to get some documentation now, and then possibly revisit this down the line and see sort of how it's evolved. So anyway, hope you enjoyed. I'll try to update on this system again in the future, and I'll give you a few minutes here of just undisturbed, no commentary, just so you can soak it in. Aloha.